Hello everyone, welcome to the second episode of the Bedrock Redstone Crash Course series. I'm going to start calling it BRC for short. If you haven't checked out the first episode and are new to Redstone, I do recommend giving it a watch because we start with the very basics in that one. But in today's episode, we start moving away from the basics. This episode is going to be the first of 3 or 4 episodes focused on circuits. Circuits in Minecraft are pretty much just how you move power from the input to whatever you're trying to power, and there's pretty much an endless way to construct circuits. So the next 3 or 4 episodes will be focused on splitting different circuits into categories and explaining how they work. Our categories are transmission circuits, logic circuits, pulse circuits, clock circuits, memory circuits, and miscellaneous circuits. Today we will be focused on transmission circuits, but before we get started on that, I would like to say thank you to everybody who's been supporting the channel. It really means a lot to me. The first BRC episode got the most likes of any of the videos on my channel, so I am super thankful for that, and I really appreciate you taking the time to watch it. And if you're new, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoy it, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can see future videos. Transmission isn't the most interesting topic in the world, but from my experience, knowing the best way to get a redstone signal from point A to point B can save you a lot of time and really help to condense your redstone contraptions. For example, here we have a basic redstone circuit. This line powers that lamp and this line powers that lamp. And you can see that we run this line over the top so the lines don't cross and mess up your circuit. And this can actually be made a little bit smaller by adding some repeaters in the middle and making what is known as a repeater bridge. And this may only save you 1 block, but 1 block can be a lot when you're in a really tight space. And this is especially true when you start to deal with vertical transmission. When you start to worry about moving a redstone line up or down, it's really useful to know what the best way is for your contraption. Here we have what is known as the redstone staircase, and it's pretty simple. You're just running a redstone line up or down blocks to power whatever you need to. And here we have one that's going straight up the blocks, and this one's going up in more of like a spiral staircase. And they can go downwards as well. And it's pretty simple. In a real redstone contraption, you're going to run the lines however you need to, but this is more of an example of how you can fit them in different spaces. This one, for instance, may be best if you've only got like a block wide space to work with, but this one may be better if you're trying to run a redstone signal pretty much straight up from where you powered it. Next, we have the redstone ladder, which takes use of transparent blocks like glass, slabs, glowstone, pretty much anything the game considers transparent you can place down diagonally and run a redstone line upwards without the signal getting cut off. But you can see if we try this with solid blocks, the redstone signal gets cut off and you're just left with unpowered redstone dust. Now, most transparent blocks when used in a redstone ladder can only send a signal upwards. They can't send it downwards. But the exception is, on the Bedrock edition, you can send a redstone signal downwards through glass. And this can be a super useful exploit to know when you're building your redstone contraptions. Just using redstone dust in your circuits has its limitations though. It can be pretty bulky and can only go 15 blocks without having something to repeat the signal. This brings us to our next 3 circuits, the torch tower, torch ladder, and the torch cascade. Now, the torch tower and the torch ladder are pretty much the same. They both can only send a redstone signal upwards, but the torch tower is only 1 block long, while the torch ladder is 2 blocks long. But the torch ladder uses more torches, and that gives you better control of the height at which your redstone circuit ends. Now, the torch cascade is pretty much the opposite of the 2 of these. It can only send a redstone signal downwards, and it alternates torches and redstone dust. The redstone tower is actually one of my personal favorite circuits because it's super compact and silent. The next few circuits are the opposite of silent. They are the piston towers, which take use of sticky pistons and redstone blocks to extend the signal up or down. Now, I do believe that being able to directly power pistons upwards like this only works on the Bedrock edition due to the Java edition having some weird quasi-connectivity problems, which pretty much just means that the pistons get indirectly powered even though they shouldn't. Now, you can extend piston towers by using slime blocks, and this can be super useful because you can go a pretty far distance without having to use a lot of pistons. Using sticky pistons and slime blocks can create some really interesting contraptions like flying machines and secret entrances and self-building houses. The list goes on, but when you combine these two together, you can make some really awesome stuff. Next is the observer wire, which is pretty much just a line of observers. Starting with this one, detects the state of this redstone dust, and then sends a signal, and then this one detects it, and then it pretty much just repeats up to the top. This is super useful if you need to just send one quick redstone pulse instead of trying to turn it completely on. And we can actually alternate using observers and droppers, so pretty much when this dropper is powered, this observer will send a signal powering this dropper, and it continues all the way up to the top. The only downside with this one, though, is it's not silent. The last three circuits I have for vertical transmission are some of the easiest circuits, especially if you don't have a lot of supplies. This first one is the dropper method, which is pretty much you have an item in a dropper spits it out, and it lands on a pressure plate, gives you a redstone pulse. And the next one is pretty similar, except for it uses a dispenser and water. Spit the water out, have an observer at the bottom, and it gives you a redstone pulse. And the last one uses the new 116 target block, which is a super cool block. And you can take a dispenser and put any item like any projectile item like a snowball or arrows, stuff like that, and you can spit it out and get a redstone signal. Now, before we go on to the last little bit of the video, I thought we would take a break and I would show you what I think is probably the worst way to send a redstone signal up. Let me get situated here, and yeah, this is pretty bad. Can you imagine if you had to run all of your contraptions like this? Like, oh, I'm going AFK for the night. Let me hop into my my what would you even call this? Slime launcher? The next section of transmission circuits is a pretty small section. These are diode circuits, and all a diode circuit is a redstone circuit that only allows you to send a signal through one direction. And the most basic one is a repeater, because you can send a redstone signal this way through it, but you can't send one this way through it. And we had a few of these diode circuits in the vertical transmission section. I believe the torch tower is one, because you can send a redstone signal upwards, but you can't send one downwards. And this one here with the repeater is known as a component diode circuit. This one is known as a block diode circuit, and it allows you to send redstone signals from multiple directions, but only have one output. And this can be super useful if you wanted to do something like, if any of these are on, I want this to be powered. And then the last diode circuit that I have to show here is one that we kind of saw earlier, and it's the transparent diode circuit. And it uses the fact that you can send a redstone signal up through transparent blocks, but you can't send them back down through transparent blocks. And once again, we do have an exception on the Bedrock edition, because you can send a redstone signal through glass even though it is a transparent block. The last section of transmission circuits is all about repeating a redstone signal, and we know from the basics that a redstone line can only go 15 blocks before it runs out of power, and it needs something to extend or repeat the redstone signal. And obviously we have this in the game. This is the repeater, and that makes it pretty simple. But before this was in the game, they created circuits to do this exact same thing. This one right here is known as the double torch repeater, and if we power it, it actually turns this torch off, which turns this one back on and sends a redstone signal to this right here. And then this next one is what's known as a single torch repeater, and it's pretty much the same thing, except for you have to invert your switch. So it has to be on for it to be off. Like, it has to have power going to it to turn it off. And you can space these out to turn it back into a double torch repeater. And then the last way is using a piston and a redstone block like we did in the vertical transmission section, except for just laying down. Lastly, we have two-way repeaters, which lets you turn a diode circuit where you can only send a redstone signal in one direction into a two-way circuit where you can send it in two directions. And this one here is called the comparison two-way repeater because it uses comparators to compare the redstone signal, allowing you to send the signal from either direction. And then the next one is known as the move block two-way repeater, and it uses the functionality of sticky pistons and redstone blocks to pretty much do the same thing that happens over here. And then the next one is the classic two-way repeater, and it's a lot like the first one as well, except for instead of using comparators, it uses redstone torches and repeaters. And lastly, we have the locked two-way repeater. This is my version of it because I could not get the version I was looking up online to work on the Bedrock edition, but it's pretty much just like the other two-way repeaters, except for it's got some pretty cool functionality because just like the other repeaters, you can send a redstone signal through this way, and you can also send one through this way, but if you try to send them through at the same time while that one is already powered first, nothing happens. And that's because when this one sends a redstone signal through, it locks this one being able to send a redstone signal through and can't send it through until this one is unpowered. And vice versa. Now that this one is powered, this redstone signal can't get through until that one becomes unpowered. We just went through a lot of different circuits, and we have tons more for future episodes, but we're almost out of time, and we've went through everything that I want to go over in the transmission section of circuits, because honestly, any circuit can fall in the transmission section of circuits. I mean, that's what a circuit does, is it transmits a redstone signal. But the other sections are going to be more categorized based on functionality. And I can't wait to get into some of the more complex ones. But before we go today, just like we did last time, I would like to, at the end of each episode, go over one of my favorite redstone contraptions. This is what I'm calling the Mega Fun Bounce House, and I created this last night just for entertainment's sake. You simply just flick this little lever right here, and all your childhood dreams come to life. Woo! Yeah, this is pretty great. I could honestly sit here and do this all day. Just sit here and bounce up and down. With my volume now turned down, let's go underneath this thing and see how it works. Now, I am no professional redstone engineer. I just had an idea last night and started running with it. And you can see the first thing that I did here was I used the fact that honey blocks and slime blocks don't actually stick together. And I used this down here as well, but I was pretty limited on space, so I couldn't get it to where I could fire each piston above individually, and I would have really liked to do that, but I just couldn't figure out how to do it. And then the next thing I did was I hooked up a comparator here into subtract mode to send out a continuous pulse. And then I just ran the redstone signal into each piston, and then it got copied over here with this torch and just continued to send it down the line into each row of pistons. And the other thing that I did to make it a little bit more random is that I put all these repeaters on different levels all the way back here and all the way to back here as well. And this is pretty cool because when this redstone signal gets sent through here, it's already at one level, and then this adjusts it to another level, and then this adjusts it to an even different level, and that creates a pretty randomized pulse that makes you bounce pretty high. This was a lot of fun to work on, but there is definitely room for improvement. Like I said, I would really like to find a way to make the pistons fire individually, and I think this would create a lot less clumps of groups firing at the same time and create more of like a popcorn effect where it's really, really random. But overall, I really love this. If you made it to the end of the video, first of all, thanks. Second, leave me a comment down below letting me know what you would like to see in future episodes. And as usual, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you want to see future episodes, don't forget to subscribe.